I signed a contract marriage with a Korean Mafia boss. It started as a deal, ended in chaos. The officiant's voice echoed through the ballroom, but Amma couldn't hear it over the sound of her own heartbeat. She stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than her parents' house, her hand trembling in the grip of a man whose name she'd only known for 6 weeks. Kang Min-jae's fingers tightened, not comfort, control. The tattoo on his neck caught the chandelier light as he turned to face her, and she saw it then, the flicker of something desperate behind those cold eyes. Around them, 200 guests watched in silence. Half were his people, the other half were strangers paid to look like hers. She'd signed the contract because she thought she understood the terms. Stand beside him for 18 months, smile when required, ask no questions. In return, her family's debt disappears and she walks away with enough money to rebuild her life. Clean, simple, transactional. But the way he was looking at her now, like she was the only thing keeping him from drowning, told her the contract had been a lie from the beginning. Behind them, a door opened. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Min-jae's entire body went rigid. His jaw clenched and his grip on her hand shifted to her wrist, too tight, too fast. Amma felt the shift before she understood it. Whatever was walking through that door wasn't part of the plan, and neither of them was going to walk out the same. First time here, you're already in, stay close. The next story's already in motion. 6 weeks earlier, Mensah had been standing in a cramped office in Itaewon, staring at a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a tailored nightmare. Kang Min-jae sat behind a glass desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. The tattoo on his neck, a thin, coiled serpent, was the only thing about him that felt alive. The rest of him was marble. "You speak Korean," he said, not a question. "Enough to work," Amma replied. She kept her posture straight, her voice even. She'd learned early that confidence was the only currency that mattered when you had nothing else. "And you need money. Everyone needs money." His mouth didn't move, but something shifted in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or assessment. "Your visa expires in 4 months, Min-jae continued. "You're 3 months behind on remittances to Ghana. Your younger brother stopped going to school because your mother can't afford the fees. You work 2 jobs and you're still sinking." Amma's throat tightened. She didn't ask how he knew. Men like him always knew. "I'm offering you a solution," he said. "I don't do that kind of work." "I'm not asking you to." He slid a folder across the desk. "I'm asking you to marry me." The room went still. Amma didn't reach for the folder. "Why?" "Because I need a wife, temporarily." "You could marry anyone." "I need someone no one will believe." That landed differently. Amma's fingers curled against her thigh. "You mean someone black?" Min-jae's gaze didn't waver. "I mean someone who doesn't belong to my world. Someone whose presence will look like rebellion. Someone they'll underestimate." "They?" "My family, my competitors, people who think they know what I'll do next." Amma let the silence stretch. She'd been in Seoul long enough to know how these things worked. Image was leverage, reputation was survival, and a man like Kang Min-jae didn't do anything without a reason that served him. "What's the terms?" she asked. He opened the folder himself. Inside was a contract, 20 pages, single-spaced in both Korean and English. Amma scanned the first page. 18 months, public appearances as required, separate living arrangements, no romantic involvement, no questions about his business. At the end, a payout, 200 million won, roughly $150,000. It was more money than she'd see in 10 years. "Your family's debt will be cleared within the first month," Min-jae added. "Your brother goes back to school. Your mother gets a new roof. You walk away clean." "And what do you get?" "A disruption," he said simply, "one they won't see coming." Amma closed the folder. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. There were 1,000 ways this could go wrong, and one way it could save everyone she loved. "I need 3 days," she said. "You have 2." She met his eyes. They were black, unreadable, and sharp enough to cut. "Then I'll see you in 2 days," Amma said. She took the folder and walked out. 48 hours later, she was back in his office with a signed contract and a list of her own conditions. Min-jae read them without expression. "No public affection unless absolutely necessary," he read aloud. "No interference in my personal life. No surprise appearances at my workplace. And if anyone threatens me because of this arrangement, you handle it." He looked up. "You negotiate like you've done this before." "I negotiate like I don't plan to get played." For the first time, something resembling a smile touched his mouth. It didn't reach his eyes. "We'll do well together," he said. Amma wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. The first public appearance was a dinner at a restaurant in Gangnam, one of those places where the door had no sign and the waitstaff moved like ghosts. Amma wore a black dress Min-jae's assistant had delivered to her apartment that afternoon. It fit like it had been made for her, because it had. She arrived 10 minutes early. Min-jae was already there, seated at a corner table with 3 men in dark suits. The conversation stopped the moment she walked in. Min-jae stood. His movements were controlled, deliberate. He met her halfway and offered his arm. Amma took it, her fingers light against his sleeve. "Gentlemen," Min-jae said in Korean, his voice smooth, "this is Amma, my fiancée." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. One of the men, older, gray at the temples, eyes like river stones, leaned back in his chair. "You're full of surprises, Min-jae SSI." "I don't believe in being predictable," Choi Sajang. Choi's gaze slid to Amma. He didn't bother hiding the assessment. She felt it like a hand on her spine, clinical, dismissive, searching for weakness. "She's lovely," Choi said in English, his accent thick. "Does she understand what she's gotten into?" Amma smiled. She didn't need Min-jae to translate. "I understand more than you think," she replied in Korean. Choi's expression flickered, surprise, then something colder. Min-jae's hand settled on the small of her back, a gesture so subtle it could have been mistaken for affection. But Amma felt the pressure. The message was clear: let me lead. The dinner lasted 2 hours. Amma spoke when spoken to, smiled when expected, and watched everything. She learned quickly that Min-jae's world was built on layers: what was said, what was implied, and what was left unsaid. Choi asked questions that sounded polite but weren't. The other 2 men barely spoke, but their eyes tracked every movement. By the time dessert arrived, Amma's jaw ached from the tension she was holding in her teeth. When they finally left, Min-jae walked her to the car in silence. His driver opened the door and Amma slid into the backseat. Min-jae followed. The door closed. The world went quiet. "You did well," Min-jae said. Amma exhaled slowly. "Choi doesn't believe you." "He's not supposed to, not yet." "Then what was the point?" Min-jae looked at her, and for the first time she saw something underneath the control. Calculation, yes, but also something sharper, something personal. "The point," he said quietly, "is that now he's watching, and when people watch they make mistakes." Amma wanted to ask what kind of mistakes, but the look on his face told her she wouldn't get an answer. Not yet. 3 weeks in, the pattern became routine. Public dinners, charity galas, a private screening where Min-jae's hand stayed on her waist for 40 minutes straight, and Amma had to remind herself it wasn't real. None of it was real. But proximity was a strange thing. It created familiarity where there shouldn't be any. She learned that Min-jae drank his coffee black and hated small talk, that he could sit in silence for an hour without needing to fill it, that the tattoo on his neck was older than the rest, something he'd gotten before he became who he was now. She also learned that people were afraid of him, not in the loud, obvious way, in the way they hesitated before speaking, the way they watched his hands, the way rooms shifted when he entered. Amma had grown up around powerful men. Her father had been a chief in their village, respected, feared, obeyed. But this was different. Min-ye's power wasn't inherited, it was built, and that made it dangerous in a way she couldn't quite name. One night after a particularly tense dinner with his business partners, Min-ye's driver took them back to the penthouse where they were supposed to be living together. It was a showpiece, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a kitchen Amma had never seen him use. She had her own wing. They rarely crossed paths unless the cameras required it. But that night, Min-ye poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "You don't have to drink it," he said. Amma took it anyway. She sat on the edge of the sectional and he stood by the window looking out at the city. "Choi's pushing back," Min-ye said. "I noticed. He thinks you're a liability." "Am I?" Min-ye turned. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and for a moment he looked almost human. "Not in the way he thinks." Amma sipped the whiskey. It burned clean and sharp. "What does that mean?" "It means he's going to test you, soon. And when he does..." Min-ye's jaw tightened. "You don't break." It wasn't advice, it was a command. Amma set the glass down. "I didn't sign up to be your soldier." "No," Min-ye said quietly. "You signed up to be my wife, that's worse." The weight of that sentence settled between them. Amma wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because he was right. In his world, being his wife meant being a target, a symbol, a piece on a board she couldn't see. "Why me?" Amma asked. "Really?" Min-ye looked at her for a long time, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because you're the only person I've met in 5 years who didn't want something from me before I offered it." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Amma didn't know what to do with it. So she stood, walked past him and went to her room. But she didn't sleep. The test came 2 days later. Amma was leaving a cafe in Hongdae when a black sedan pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. A man she didn't recognize leaned out. "Get in," he said in Korean. Amma's instinct screamed, but before she could move, another man stepped out of the passenger side. He wasn't holding a weapon, but the threat was clear. "Choi Sajing wants to talk," the first man said. Amma's phone was in her bag. She could call Min-ye. She could run, she could scream. But none of those options would end well. So she got in the car. They drove for 20 minutes, winding through side streets until they reached a restaurant Amma didn't recognize. The man led her inside, through a private hallway, and into a back room where Choi sat alone at a low table. He gestured to the seat across from him. Amma sat. Her heart was pounding, but her face stayed calm. "You're braver than I thought," Choi said. He poured her tea slow and deliberate, or more foolish. "I haven't decided yet," Amma replied. Choi smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. "Min-ye is playing a dangerous game," he said, "and you're the piece he's betting on. Do you know why?" "I don't ask questions I won't get answers to." "Smart," Choi sipped his tea, "but not smart enough. Min-ye is using you to destabilize an arrangement that's kept this city balanced for 15 years. If he succeeds, people lose power, money, respect. If he fails, people die." Amma's fingers tightened around the teacup. "And you're telling me this because you care about my safety." "I'm telling you because you have a choice." Choi leaned forward. "Walk away now. I'll pay you double what he promised. Your family gets what they need. You disappear. No one has to know." The offer hung in the air like smoke. Amma thought about her mother, her brother, the life she could give them with that money. Then she thought about the look in Min-ye's eyes when he'd said, "You don't break." She set the teacup down. "I signed a contract," Amma said. "Contracts can be broken." "Not by me." Choi's expression hardened. The warmth drained from the room. "Then you're more foolish than I thought," he said. He stood and the men reappeared. They escorted her back to the car, drove her to Itaewon, and dropped her at the corner near her apartment. She didn't call Min-ye. But when she got home, he was already there. He was sitting on her couch, still in his suit, his phone dark on the table in front of him. The moment Amma walked in, his eyes locked on her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No." "Did he touch you?" "No." Min-jae stood. The controlled mask he always wore had cracks in it now, something raw underneath. "He offered me money," Amma said. "Double what you're paying." Min-jae went still. "I told him no." The silence stretched. Then Min-jae exhaled, slow and deliberate, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Why?" he asked. Amma met his gaze. "Because I keep my word." Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like respect or guilt. "He's going to push harder now," Min-jae said. "I know." "You could still walk away." "Could I?" Min-jae's jaw tightened. They both knew the answer. Amma stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the exhaustion he kept buried under control. "What happens if you lose?" she asked quietly. Min-jae looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the truth. "Then we both disappear," he said. The engagement party was 3 weeks later. It was held at a private estate outside Seoul, one of those places with gates that didn't open unless you were on a very specific list. Amma wore a white gown that made her feel like she was dressing for a funeral. Min-jae wore black, sharp and immaculate, the tattoo on his neck just visible above his collar. They arrived together. His hand stayed on her back the entire walk inside. The ballroom was filled with people Amma didn't know, business partners, family members, faces she'd seen in passing at previous events. They all watched as Min-jae guided her through the room, his movements calm, his presence suffocating. Halfway through the night, his mother approached. She was smaller than Amma expected, elegant in the way that only generational wealth could create. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, cold. "So," she said in English, her accent precise, "you're the reason my son has decided to embarrass this family." Amma felt Min-jae's hand tighten on her waist. "Mother," he said in Korean, his voice low, "this isn't the place." "Then where is?" His mother's gaze didn't leave Amma. "You bring this girl into our lives, parade her in front of everyone and expect us to smile." "You'll smile," Min-jae said quietly, "because if you don't, I'll make sure you have nothing left to smile about." The threat was so calm it took Amma a moment to register it. His mother's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, fear or fury. She walked away without another word. Amma exhaled slowly. "That was expected," Min-jae finished. He turned her toward the center of the room. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. The music shifted, something slow, strings and piano. Min-jae's hand settled on her waist and Amma's fingers rested on his shoulder. They moved in sync and the room watched. "Your mother hates me," Amma said quietly. "She hates everyone. She hates me more." Min-jae's gaze dropped to hers. "She's afraid of you." "Why?" "Because you're the one thing she can't control." Amma wanted to ask what that made her, but she already knew. A weapon, a disruption, a risk he'd chosen to take. The song ended. The room applauded. Min-jae leaned in, his mouth close to her ear. "2 more hours," he murmured, "then we're done." But they weren't. Because halfway through the next dance, the doors opened. And Amma saw the man who walked in. She didn't recognize him, but Min-jae did. His entire body went rigid. His hand on her waist shifted to a grip, tight, controlled, protective. "Don't move," he said quietly. The man crossed the room in slow, deliberate steps. He was older, mid-50s, with silver hair and a face carved from stone. He stopped 3 feet away. "Min-jae," the man said. His voice was soft, dangerous. "Hyung," Min-jae replied. "Brother." Amma's stomach dropped. The man's gaze shifted to her. He studied her like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. "So this is her," he said. The reason you're burning everything down." Min-yi didn't respond. The man smiled. It was the kind of smile that promised violence. "Enjoy the party," he said. Then he walked away. The room exhaled. Amma looked up at Min-yi. His face was stone, but his hand was still trembling against her waist. "Who was that?" she whispered. Min-yi didn't answer. But when they left that night, he didn't let go of her until they were inside the car. And even then, his hand stayed on hers. 3 days after the engagement party, Amma woke to a phone call at 4 a.m. It was Min-yi's assistant. "Get dressed," the woman said. "A car is outside. You have 5 minutes." Amma didn't ask questions. She threw on jeans and a jacket and ran downstairs. The car took her to a building she'd never seen before, industrial, anonymous, somewhere in the outskirts of Seoul. Min-yi was waiting inside, packing in a warehouse lit by a single overhead light. He looked like he hadn't slept. "What's going on?" Amma asked. Min-yi stopped. His eyes were dark, wild in a way she hadn't seen before. "My brother," he said. "He knows." "Knows what?" "Why I married you." Amma's breath caught. "I thought this was about disruption, about—" "It was," Min-yi's voice cracked, "but that's not the only reason." The air went cold. "Then what is?" Amma demanded. Min-yi looked at her, and the mask finally shattered. "Because if I didn't marry someone outside the family, outside the business, my brother was going to force me into an arrangement that would have locked me into this life forever." His voice was raw now, stripped of control. "He was going to marry me to the daughter of a rival clan, a merger, a leash. I would have had no way out." Amma stared at him. "So I'm your escape plan." "You were supposed to be." Min-yi's hands clenched. "But he figured it out. And now he's threatening to go after you, to hurt your family, to make sure you disappear if I don't fall in line." The words hit like a fist. Amma's mind raced. Her mother, her brother, everyone she loved. "You used me," she said quietly. "Yes." "You put a target on my back." "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." Min-yi's jaw tightened. "I thought I could control it. I thought," his voice broke, "I thought I could protect you." Amma wanted to scream, to run, to demand he fix this. But she saw the truth in his eyes. He couldn't. "What do we do?" she asked. Min-yi looked at her like she just saved his life. "We finish this," he said. The plan was simple, brutal, necessary. Min-yi's brother, Kang Jun-ho, had built his empire on secrets, blackmail, information brokered in shadows. If they wanted to survive, they had to expose him, publicly, irreversibly. It would take everything they had, and it would cost more than money. Amma spent the next 2 weeks learning the landscape of Min-yi's world in a way she never had before. She met his inner circle, the people who kept his empire running. She saw the ledgers, the networks, the violence that lived just beneath the surface. And she realized something that should have been obvious from the start. Min-yi had been trapped long before she ever signed that contract. One night in the penthouse, Amma found him standing by the window again. He was holding a glass of whiskey, but he wasn't drinking it. "You could have told me," she said quietly. "Would you have stayed?" Amma thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know," she admitted. Min-yi turned. The city lights reflected in his eyes and he looked so tired, so human. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first time he'd apologized for anything. Amma crossed the room. She stood in front of him, close enough to feel the tension radiating off his body. "Don't apologize," she said. "Just don't lie to me again." Min-yi's hand came up, slow, hesitant, like he wasn't sure he had the right. His fingers brushed her cheek. "I won't," he whispered. And for the first time, Amma believed him. The confrontation happened at the wedding. Min-yi had planned it perfectly. The ceremony would be public, massive, impossible to ignore. and in the middle of it they would release everything: the evidence, the recordings, the paper trail that tied Jun-ho to a dozen illegal operations. It would destroy him, and it would free Min-jae. But it required one thing. Amma had to stand beside him when it happened. She had to choose. The morning of the wedding, Amma woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. The dress was already hanging in her room, white lace, delicate, beautiful. It felt like armor. Min-jae knocked on her door at noon. "You don't have to do this," he said when she opened it. Amma looked at him, really looked at him. The man who dragged her into his war. The man who'd been honest too late. The man who was asking her to stand beside him anyway. "Yes," she said, "I do." Because somewhere along the way this had stopped being about the money, or the contract, or even survival. It had become about something harder to name. The ballroom was perfect, 200 guests, flowers everywhere, the officiant waiting at the altar. Amma walked down the aisle alone, no one to give her away, just her and the choice she'd made. Min-jae stood at the altar, and when their eyes met, she saw everything he was trying not to say. The ceremony began. And then the door opened. Jun-ho walked in. The room went silent. Min-jae's hand found Amma's, and he held on like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Jun-ho walked to the front. He stopped 5 feet away. "You really thought you could do this," he said quietly. "You thought you could burn me and walk away." Min-jae's voice was steady. "I'm not walking away, I'm walking forward." Jun-ho laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Then you're a fool." That's when Min-jae nodded to his assistant. The screens around the room flickered to life. Documents, recordings, bank transfers, everything that proved what Jun-ho had done. The room exploded. Jun-ho's face went white, then red, then murderous. He lunged for Min-jae. But Amma stepped forward first. She didn't think, she just moved. And when Jun-ho's hand came toward Min-jae, it was Amma who caught his wrist. "You're done," she said quietly. Jun-ho looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then security moved in. They dragged him out and the room erupted into chaos. Min-jae turned to Amma, and the look on his face was something she'd never seen before. Relief, gratitude, something deeper. "You didn't have to." "Yes," Amma said, "I did." The officiant cleared his throat. "Should we continue?" Min-jae looked at Amma. Amma looked back. And they both laughed, quiet, exhausted, real. "Yeah," Min-jae said, "let's finish this." They said their vows, not because a contract required it, but because somewhere along the way they'd chosen each other. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Min-jae hesitated. Amma leaned in and kissed him first. It was soft, brief, and entirely theirs. The room applauded, but Amma didn't hear it. Because for the first time in 6 weeks, she felt like she could breathe. 3 months later, they were sitting on the penthouse balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The contract had been dissolved. Amma's family was safe. Min-jae's brother was in prison. The empire had shifted, restructured, but it still stood. And so did they. "You know," Amma said quietly, "I could leave now. The terms are met." Min-jae looked at her. "You could. But I'm not going to." He smiled, a real one this time. "Good," he said, "because I wasn't planning to let you." Amma laughed. It was the kind of laugh that carried relief and exhaustion and something dangerously close to happiness. "So what now?" she asked. Min-jae took her hand. "Now we figure out what comes after the deal." Amma leaned into him, and the city stretched out below them, endless, unforgiving, and somehow theirs. Sometimes the chaos isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something you didn't know you needed. Would you have signed the contract, knowing what it might cost?